Hey guys, just a quick little shout out before I talk about the new Dominaria cards that I haven't already talked about. If you ever want to submit a deck list to me, I know it's down in the description all the time, but I just figured I'd spell it out for you guys right now. If you ever wanted to submit a deck list to me, go to this link right here, pauperponderings@gmail.com. I am always taking deck lists. I will always give you feedback as best that I can. But yeah, if you ever want to send me a deck list, pauperponderings@gmail.com. Also, make sure you comment on this video. I'm going to open this one up too. If you want this pauper print, which is right here, make sure you comment on this video. Tell me which cards I missed. Tell me which cards that you think are worse than I think they are, or better than I think they are, etc., etc. Make sure you tell me how much of an idiot I am, because you know I love to hear that. And finally, starting probably next week, I'm going to be probably announcing it next week's Pauper Ponderings, or the next Pauper Ponderings, my streaming schedule. It'll probably be 1 to 2 days a week. I'll be streaming most likely decks that I play on Pauper Ponderings. You can check that out right here, www.twitch.tv/limey1s. So make sure you check that out. I probably will change it to twitch.tv/pauperponderings, but we'll see. Anyways, for right now, stay tuned for that. But without further ado, let's talk about these new Dominaria cards. Alright, so I'm going to talk about all the Dominaria cards that I haven't already discussed. I already did another video. The link is right here. There it is there. Make sure you check that out. I talk about Vicious, Offering, along with a couple other cards. So if you want to hear my impressions on those cards, make sure you go check that out. But right now, we are going to talk about Dominaria. And specifically some of the better cards in the set that I think anyways are going to impact Pauper. And we're going to actually look at some deck lists that I've kind of come up with that I think have a chance to be players in the metagame, you know, maybe small players, but definitely some impact cards that have created new archetypes with this set. So without further ado, let's get talking about some cards. Alright, so the first card I want to talk about is Gitu Lava Runner. So this is 1 red for a 1/2, but if you have 2 instants and or sorceries in your graveyard, it gets +1/+0 in haste. So if you're playing it in any sort of like a mono-red aggro or mono-red burn deck, I think this is a welcome addition to, you know, Thermo Alchemist and Thornbow Archers. I actually think this card could slot its way into the burn decks right now. The question is whether or not you want 12 creatures in that deck. I think that Thornbow Archers and Thermo Alchemist are both better cards than Gitu Lava Runner, but I do think that it's worth mentioning. And if you're looking for another threat, the biggest thing with these red decks is that, on the face of it, if your deck is, you know, X amount of just lightning bolts, most of the time you're going to either flood out or it's not going to do enough damage. You know, they're going to get something like a Lone Missionary in play or gain any amount of life. And then your clock just becomes far too slow and you're just way too linear in what you're trying to do. And I know that sounds ridiculous when you talk about, you know, mono red. It's the most linear deck there is, essentially. But actually, the reason that the red decks in Modern are so powerful and Legacy are so powerful is because of the creatures. You know, you have Monastery's Whisper, you have Goblin Guide, you have Eidolon of the Great Revel. These cards are the backbone of that deck, and it may look like Lightning Bolt and it may look like Rift Bolt are the backbones of those decks, but it's actually the creatures. It's the recurrable sources of damage that you don't need to continually spend cards on. It's great that Lightning Bolt is 3 damage 1 card, and Rift Bolt is 3 damage 1 card, and, you know, so on and so forth. A card like Goblin Guide is most likely going to be, you know, 6 damage 1 card. And a card like Eidolon of the Great Revel is most likely going to be 6 to 8 damage for 1 card. Those are the ways that that deck generates card advantage. And you don't think of Mono Red as this card advantage deck. But when you are equating damage to cards, and we can say that 3 damage is 1 card, then a card like Goblin Guide dealing, you know, 4 to 6 damage, well, that becomes 2 cards. So that's your divination, if you want. Or a card like Eidolon of the Great Revel dealing, you know, 6, 8, even 10 points of damage. That becomes closer to something like an Ancestral Recall for the red deck, because they want to turn their cards into damage, whereas the same way a Grixis control deck or a, you know, blue-black control deck or a Delver deck wants to turn their cards into either more cards, more answers, more threats, in the same kind of way. And when you equate the threats and the burn spells into, you know, I guess kind of raw numbers, a card like Gitu Lava Runner allows you to play this kind of recursive game. It can maybe attack for 2, maybe 4, maybe 6 damage, and that's huge when you're looking at a deck that's running, you know, Lone Missionary and Core Skyfisher to bounce the Lone Missionary. So I think something like a Gitu Lava Runner, well, maybe not good enough, maybe just not as good as Thermal Alchemist or Thornbow Archers, I think has the potential to be a role player in the mono red deck, or possibly even like some sort of blue red kind of spells matter deck, because you know a 2/2 haste for 1 mana is pretty powerful. That's just better stats than Goblin Guide on most of the time. If you go turn 1, I guess in a perfect world, double Gitaxian Probe into this thing, that's very powerful. So I do think E2 Lava Runner, the power level is there, just whether or not the deck is there. Alright, so the next card I want to talk about is Dark Bargain. It's 3 and a black for an instant. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, you put 2 of them into your hand, and then the other one into your graveyard, and then it deals 2 damage to you. This card, I think, has the potential to, kind of be a role player in the blue-black control decks, but more likely in the mono-black decks, in the mono-black control decks, where that deck is really looking for card advantage. You're playing things like Phyrexian Rager, you're playing things like Chittering Rats. These are cards that are meant to either deny your opponent resources or give you resources. It's a mid-range deck at its heart, and having an extra card like this, and I don't even think it needs to go in the main deck of mono black control, but it can go just in the sideboard, into the matchups where you need them, in the mirror matches against the blue black control decks. This card is very powerful, and you very rarely see, a black draw spell that is this powerful at the common rarity, and I'm pretty excited to see where this card slots in. I could even see it taking the spot of Forbidden Alchemy in blue-black control, and maybe I'm being a little too naive in that regard, but I do think that this card does have legs. Alright, so the next card that we're going to look at is Adventurous Impulse. This is 1 green for a green sorcery. Let's look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand, and then put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. People have been calling this the Green Ponder. I thought that was already Oath of Nissa, but, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. This card is quite good. It's just a matter of where this card goes, You'd think of this maybe in like a green-blue deck, but then you just would rather run Ponder. Ponder is just a better card. You could possibly run it in like a mono-green Stompy style deck. I think that's where this card maybe is a little bit better. And it's kind of on the downturn in terms of how good that deck is, just because Lead the Stampede makes elves just so much better. But something like this could possibly make that mono-green Stompy deck a deck again. Lots of the time you're kind of looking for specific pieces. You're either looking for a threat or maybe looking for your second land because that deck is so land light. I think that this is something that could find its way into those mono green Stompy decks, possibly even into Tron. There's a chance this thing goes into Tron. Maybe it's just strictly worse Ancient Stirrings, and I'm being, again, a little naive, but these are new cards and it is worth talking about. I think that maybe there's room for it, and that's what it's fun around new sets. You get to talk about these powerful cards. What do you think about Adventurous Impulse? Let me know in the comments. Alright, so the final individual card I want to talk about is Blood Tallow Candle. Now, this card looks really just straight up nonsense when you look at it. It's just, this thing's just a bad Chainer's Edicts, this thing's just a bad Doomblade. But the reason I want to talk about it is because it makes Trinket Mage just a little bit better. And it's always cool when these things from the past get these new tools. And that's why people love Trinket Mage. They want to jam it on all these decks. It goes and gets all these nonsense little artifacts. The fact that now that it has Blood Tallow Candle, and sure, it had Executioner's Capsule before this, but, sometimes you need to kill a creature that's black, or sometimes you need to kill a creature that's indestructible, or sometimes you need to kill a creature that has protection from monocolor. So having Blood Tallow Candle as an option for Trinket Mage pilots now is huge. That is something that the Dominaria as a set is just so good at, because it gives all of these different things just these new tools, and I love to see that in a set. And I figured I'd show Blood Tallow Candle a little bit of props. All right, so now I want to talk about some possible deck ideas with new Dominaria cards. The first one that immediately jumped into my mind was Esper Historic. Now, Historic, if you're not aware, is a legendary card, an artifact, or a saga. Now, there aren't any common legendaries that are really worth playing, and there's no common sagas, unfortunately, but we do have a lot of very good common artifacts. Now, if you want to take a look at this deck list right here. There. This is a deck that I've definitely played decks that have looked like this in the past. I know that I'm a really big fan of Glaze Fiend. I'm a really big fan of Disciple of the Vault. I'm a really big fan of Ethereum Sculptor. Giving it 2 new pieces in Sarah Disciple, which is 1 and a white when it whenever you cast an historic spell, but in our case it's just going to be artifact. It's going to get +1/+1, and it's a 2-mana 1/1 first striker, as you can see on the screen. Now, this card, I think, just in addition to Glaze Fiend, just gives you more threats. The other card, Cabal Paladin, 3 and a black for a 4/2. Whenever you cast a historic spell, or in our case, an artifact, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is another card that is just kind of gives it that just little bit of extra gas. And if we look at this deck, you know, you have Ethereum Sculptor, so all of our baubles are going to be free. So you can just start churning through your deck with Chromatic Stars and Chromatic Spheres and Conjurer's Baubles, and we're going to be able to basically deal them a bunch of damage. Their artifacts are going to die. We're going to draw more cards. We're going to deal damage from Disciple of the Vault. Is this deck going to be busted? You know, maybe. Most likely it won't be, but I think it's definitely worth exploring. And if somebody wants to take this idea and kind of run with it, I'd be more than happy to give my insight and play around with some stuff. I'm really excited for this style of deck. You guys know that I love these Ethereum Sculptor Bauble style strategies in this format, and I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. I'm going to be brewing with these 2 cards a lot. Alright, so finally, this is, I guess, the funniest, or whatever, the most nonsense of everything. I want to talk about mono black rats. So we just got Rat Colony, which was printed in Dominaria. It's 1 and a black for a 2/1, and it gets +1/+0 for each rat you control, and you can have any number of rat colonies in your deck. The other sweet thing is that in Masters 25, they printed Relentless Rats as a common. So what I've come up with here is 4 Typhoid Rats, 8 Rat Colonies, 24 Relentless Rats, 4 Changers Edicts, 4 Barrenmoor, and 16 Swamps. We're looking to... Relentless Rats is the star of the show here, but you do need some amount of lower drop creatures just to kind of age your curve a little bit. So having 4 Typhoid Rats as a way to, you know, trade with the Gurmag Angler, or trade with just nonsense Carapace Forges that you might see. And then, you know, 8 Rat Colonies is a good way to pressure them early. That card's going to get really big really fast. 4 Changers Edict because that card is very good. Maybe we need more removal spells, and then 24 Relentless Rats. I think 24 is a good number. You're not going to get too flooded with them. They are basically the only creature you want to cast starting on turn 3 and forward. So having 8 Rat Colonies allows you to go on turn 5, you know, Relentless Rat Colony, or on turn 4, Relentless Typhoid Rats. That's a very good turn. I like having a little bit of a, I guess, kind of a curve of rats, if you will. Turn 6, you just want to be going Relentless Rat every single time. But I think this deck is cool. I'm most likely going to play it on Pauper Ponderings. Almost guaranteed. Probably not this exact list, but probably something similar. Maybe, you know, a little more removal spells. Maybe cut the Relentless Rats a little bit, but I don't know how many Relentless Rats you can cut. You really want that thing to be a 4/4 or 5/5 every single time so that it can tangle with the Gurmag Anglers. Because if we're paying 3 mana for a 4/4 or 3 mana for a 3/3, then we should just be playing Gurmag Anglers. And it's very important that you are not just a bad version of something else. So, you know, making sure the Relentless Rats is a 5/5 or a 6/6 is pretty important here. So I think this card is cool, but moving forward, I think it's safe to say that Dominaria has been one of the most powerful sets that we have seen in a long time. I'm super excited to start brewing with these cards. I'm super excited to brew with, you know, existing cards and how they interact with Dominaria cards. Tell me down in the comments what you think of Dominaria. Do you think it's a home run like I think it is? Do you think maybe I over-evaluated some of these cards, maybe under-evaluated some of these cards? Maybe I just didn't talk about some of the cards that you think are going to be role players or even game changers in Pauper. Let me know down in the comments. I will see you later this week with some more Pauper Ponderings. Thanks for watching, guys, and happy brewing.